Oh, I just don't have the headset. Check. No, I muted them here. Check, check, check.
Sympathies and empathy. Yep, no, we totally understand. Yep, we're good. We're ready. Okay. Well, I don't know. Then people are too antsy.
Testing, yep. Good.
Good morning.
Mamianak.
Good morning for the delay.
Kanayon niyang
Sorry. I think
Aqua.
technical difficulties have
Tao,
been
yun,
resolved.
Tungasugisi.
Welcome back.
Kamani
This is our last day. Before we proceed, Sharon has housekeeping to do. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. Welcome back to our fourth day of our public hearing here in the Kitikmeot region, hosted by the community of Cambridge Bay. For any new participants, I'll just review the emergency exits off to the side here, front and rear, and the entrance that you came in. Washrooms, still the same place as they were. Little humor after our technical difficulties. And of course, coffee, tea, snacks over there. We have a couple of changes on our agenda for today. We will be following the agenda with the exception of we'll be moving, excuse me, Sabina Gold and Silver Corp up after the Nunavut Marine Council, and then we'll follow the agenda. We have had 2 requests from registered participants that will be presenting in other regions, and if time will allow it for today, we will accommodate the Chamber of Mines and Friends of Land Use Planning with presentations after we complete the schedule agenda. With that, Mr. Chair, that's all for housekeeping for today, and I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Just a reminder, your name and your organization when you are at the mic. And in addition, please turn your cell phones off. I think we can proceed now. I think somebody wanted to speak.
Joe, nilikin na kumakamat.
Joe.
Mamaya Joe. Atigo Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Just to let you know, our community member who was with us, he is now sick, very sick, so he's not has not contracted COVID-19, but it's a terrible cold, so we'll be 1 member short. His health is improving. Just in case you are aware that we're missing 1 person, he has terrible cold. Just to let the other delegates be aware of this. Thank you for telling us. Now we know. And we have asked in the beginning, if you are not healthy, you are not to attend the proceedings until you are well.
Whenever you're ready, you guys can start. Thank you.
Morning. I am Philip Kadlutuming. Along with me this morning is one of our staff, the Director of Technical Services, Tara Arco, and I am the board member for Nunavut Impact Review Board. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Commission for involving the Nunavut Impact Review Board in the land use planning process that has been underway for several years. The chairperson sincere regrets that they were unable to attend in person during the hearing. We have got that one of our board members attend the hearing in Cambridge Bay to support the Nunavut Impact Review Board staff during their presentation, which is why I am here. We appreciate the opportunity to present the Commission with recommendations for consideration as they continue to develop the Nunavut Land Use Plan. Nunavut Impact Review Board's recommendations are based on what we have learned through the impact assessment process, and we hope that identification of potential gaps and new understanding is useful as the Commission finalizes the plan. Our staff will remain available to answer any questions. We are confident that by working together, we will be able to advance the Nunavut land use goals imagined for Nunavut before our time. And we believe we are actively making that reality by continuing to work together through the co-management system in Nunavut. I hope that everyone has a wonderful week in Cambridge Bay. I will now turn the microphone over to our staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Tara Arco, Director of Technical Services with the Nunavut Impact Review Board. So, it's your, yeah. I will be presenting on behalf of the Nunavut Impact Review Board staff at the final hearing for the Planning Commission's 2021 Draft Nunavut Land Use Plan.
Tara, they want you closer to the microphone. Say, thank you. Talk to the microphone, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Nunavut Impact Review Board is established through Articles 10 and 12 of the agreement between the Nunavut Settlement Area and Her Majesty the Queen in Rights of Canada, referenced as the Nunavut Agreement throughout the rest of this presentation, and our legislative base, the Nunavut Planning and Project Assessment Act. The Nunavut Impact Review Board's mandate is to conduct impact assessment of proposed development projects, gauge and define regional impacts, reviewing ecosystemic and socioeconomic impacts, and determining whether or not projects should be allowed to proceed, and if they are allowed to proceed, under what terms and conditions. The Nunavut Impact Review Board also monitors the effects of approved projects and their compliance with predetermined terms and conditions. Through the Integrated Resource Management regime established in the Nunavut Agreement, where the Nunavut Planning Commission, I'll refer to it here as the Commission for the remainder of the presentation, deems a proposed project to be in conformity with approved land use plans in the area, and then the NIRB conducts a project-specific impact assessment prior to the project proponent being able to obtain any licenses, permits, or approvals to proceed. The NIRB has participated in the Commission's development of the previous 2016 and current 2021 draft Nunavut land use plans. And throughout each phase of the public process to date, the NIRB has provided staff-level feedback on each draft, shared logistical information on undertaking community meetings, and continued to flag land use planning issues identified by NIRB during project-specific assessments and reconsiderations of previously approved projects. Nunavut's regulatory system requires integration between the Commission's land use planning process and the NERB's impact assessment process to operate fully as envisioned. At present, there are significant portions of the Nunavut settlement area which have no approved land use plan in place and are not subject to the Commission's land use plan conformity determination as a result. For these areas which have approved land use plans in place, with more than 50 years since their original approval, the plans themselves have become dated, and the Nunavut Impact Review Board has encountered challenges with project-specific impacts assessments where feedback from parties has called into question the acceptability of the type of project and associated land use, which is something that the land use plans are intended to address. To create awareness, when these broader land use planning issues are raised during the Nunavut's project-specific impact assessment process, the NERB has provided notice to parties and the Commission when the NERB has concluded that the issues raised during an assessment would more appropriately be addressed at the regional level through land use planning. This ongoing feedback has been provided in this submission and is carried forward through our submissions to make sure that they remain in people's awareness. Where there are no land use plans in place, or where existing and approved land use plans are not in place but have become outdated, issues more appropriately addressed through regional land use planning bypass the Planning Commission's conformity assessment process and are deferred to the NERB to address through the project-specific assessment. This situation presents unique challenges because the development-specific impact assessment process is not generally suitable to consider and address the broader issues of land or resource use at a regional scale. And as such, considerations are beyond the scope of the considerations associated with an individual project. Examples include broader decisions about the development of uranium resources, nuclear power, the development of transportation corridors, limits on development within caribou calving grounds, and these broader issues deserve consideration through the land use planning process holistically, as envisioned by the Nunavut Agreement. The NERB is supportive of the Commission's efforts to establish a Nunavut-wide land use plan, and the Board appreciates the opportunity to participate in the process for its development and approval, and supports the Commission's efforts to develop and implement an initial version of the plan, and then to regularly review or periodically revise such a plan following its approval to ensure that it remains effective and current. The NERB understands that many land uses may compete for resources. However, for developments that may specifically limit the value or viability of other resources, positive conformity determinations should provide additional direction on operational restrictions or development limitations to ensure that the impact assessment is appropriately focused. Conservation issues previously identified in the approved land use plans have been updated and in some cases changed in this version to reflect the state of specific resources and surrounding regulatory requirements. In recognizing the updated policy, the NERB has also noted where updated information would be prudent to provide parties with clarity of where resource strategies have changed significantly between previously approved plans and the current versions. For the Commission's reference, the current presentation provides the link to issues raised within the NERB's final written statement and section numbers. On the current slide, to the first point, the NERB understands that specifics around some land uses may be an evolving issue, while others are well defined in their limits. An example of these parameters of land uses may include the height of infrastructure, in triggering regulation, required offset distances, or operational windows. Some of these values and limits are found in the land use plan with justification. Some values are in the plan but with no supporting justification, and others may be found in the options documents. The NERB suggests that it is important for parties to understand how items are inserted into the plan once there is certainty, and encourages consistency between the handling of these values where only justified numbers are actually included in the plan. Items that are unjustified or have uncertainty associated with them should be noted as such and contained in a more flexible portion of the document still associated with the overall Nunavut land use plan. To the second point on this slide, while this may not be a frequent issue, the NERB notes that there is uncertainty in the draft Nunavut land use plan on how proposals for development should be handled during the time that a territorial park is proposed, and between then and the time that the park management plan is approved. This lack of detail allows for rushes of applications during times of very high uncertainty in future acceptable land uses, and creates significant challenges in a community's ability to provide feedback on a specific application. Due to some projects, proposed or approved, being within limited use areas with seasonal restrictions on operations, as well as the topics of allowable research being restricted, sometimes only to caribou-related research. The Nunavut Impact Review Board has identified potential challenges that could arise in proponents meeting obligations for general environmental monitoring around major approved projects. Again, the written submission includes recommendations on how this could be dealt with. And to the second point here, the level of detail in allowable land uses around the communities is very detailed in the current draft, and with the overall development and updating of the Nunavut-wide plan, some communities may not be able to update acceptable land uses as quickly as needed for community planning purposes. So as noted before, especially by Philip, the board member, the NERB continues to contribute and carry forward some of these issues to make sure all parties understand how the land use planning and impact assessment process can work together. On the 2016 draft version, the NERB provided 20 recommendations linked to gaps and risks identified. And in the 2021 plan, the NERB has provided some additional recommendations and again are prepared to participate through the follow-up comment period should parties be interested in more detail on these issues. So in conclusion, the NERB has participated in the Commission's process to develop a land use plan since the development of its initial drafts and continues to be supportive of implementation of a territory-wide plan, especially to provide assurances to developers, regulators, and communities alike. In its initial written submission to the Commission, the specific recommendations related to updates or clarification of issues have been retained by the NERB to ensure that the Planning Commission has the ability to follow up with justifications or redirections on how some of this feedback may have been incorporated. And the NERB has focused its presentation in this hearing on demonstrating the board's perspective on these issues so that the Commission and signatory parties may better understand the recommendations when it comes time to make the decision and implement the land use plan. The NERB expresses appreciation to the Commission, its staff, parties, the signatories in attendance at this event, and members of the public for your attention during this presentation. The NERB also appreciates the efforts of the interpreters, translators, and to the Commission appreciates the resources invested in conducting these types of proceedings and thanks the Commission for the opportunity to present our perspective. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I think we'll stick to our procedures.
Any question from the staff? Go ahead, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is Jonathan Savoy from the Nunavut Planning Commission. Thank you very much to the NERB for their presentation here today. I just have one question. Is the commitment by the Nunavut Planning Commission to initiate a comprehensive review of the approved land use plan within 7 years of its approval adequate in the NERB's view? Thank you.
Kuya Namik? Philip?
Thank you, Kubota. I'll direct that question to our technical staff. Tara?
Go ahead, Tara. State your name and organization. Just a reminder. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tara Arco, Nunavut Impact Review Board. And thank you, Jonathan, for that question. I think the answer is very parallel to a lot of the other recommendations we've made through the written submission. We have to start somewhere. The board is supportive about finding a reasonable starting point and defer to the Planning Commission's expertise in defining how long that may take for your internal obligations as well. So at this point, the board supports many of these parameters just to get started, and we can contribute more feedback as we go along as to the fit that we're experiencing from the outside, which may also be somewhat determined by the amount of work coming our way in the future. So I would just note that the board would be giving very comprehensive recommendations in the future, but does support the Commission's ability to implement at least an initial cycle before providing additional feedback. Thank you.
Kuya Namik, any more questions? Namatok? Napakot sa takaw niya kanayatini. Tamangat nunaliningak.
We have questions from the community delegates to the panel.
Community reps. Unikang watatu mo.
Questions may be directed to the presentation.
Tigo, Beverly.
Good morning, thank you. Beverly Matsagas with the manager of the Akhluk HTO. You mentioned here the gap in defining the proposals which will be considered by the Commission between parks and establishments. If I can just get some clarification from the Commission. On the first day, I was kind of confused on September 12th when they mentioned that Uvayok Park was, the signing had not been completed yet, and that the Uvayok Park still falls under the Commission's jurisdiction. And in my notes, maybe I have my notes wrong, but the answer from Jonathan Savoy was, it's administered under the Parks Canada, and it is not under the NPC's or the Commission's jurisdiction. If I could just have a little bit of clarification there.
Kuya Namik, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is Jonathan Savoy from the Nunavut Planning Commission. Thank you very much, Beverly, for the question. To clarify, the Nunavut Planning Commission does still have jurisdiction within many territorial parks, including Uvayuk Territorial Park here in Cambridge Bay, because they are not yet fully established, and the draft plan includes limited use designations that prohibit or propose to prohibit many types of industrial uses. The comment I had made earlier in the hearing about national historic sites administered by Parks Canada was in reference to the Franklin wrecks of the Erebus and Terror, and that was the only example of a national historic site administered by Parks Canada where the Commission doesn't have jurisdiction. But again, for territorial parks as well as national parks that are not yet fully finalized, the Commission retains jurisdiction at this time, and the 2021 draft plan proposes limited use designations for these areas. Thank you very much.
Kuya Namik, any other questions or clarifications? Beverly Namatok, Kuya Namik. Apa ko di sa taka sa mga
Additional questions from
suli.
delegates?
Pita ka paling
It appears there's none. We'll ask the registered participants if you have any questions
that we heard.
to the panel.
Yep, pita ka ni.
Appears none.
Kaya namig.
Thank you.
Kung ikaw nakataas.
Thank you
siya,
for your
mga kiwi
presentation and answering the questions
Patal-tal.
directed to you.
nakataas. Water board. Kaya mawalimat. At inalong matita ko
You may proceed. During the water board panel, you may proceed whenever you're ready. Just a reminder, your name and your organization before you speak, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Asol Kubisinova, and I am a technical advisor with the Nunavut Water Board. Next to me is Jesse O'Brien, who is the consultant for the Water Board. The Nunavut Water Board would like to present its comments and recommendations on the 2021 draft Nunavut Land Use Plan. I will start with an overview of the Water Board's mandate, explain the reasons of why the board is the participant in this process, provide the summary of the board's review of this draft Nunavut land use plan, and list the ways anyone can contact the board in regards to this review. And then we will be able to take your questions and record your comments. The Nunavut Water Board is an institution of public government established under Article 13 of the Nunavut Agreement. The board has responsibilities and powers over the regulation, use, and management of fresh water in the Nunavut settlement area. The objects of the Water Board are to provide for the conservation and utilization of waters in Nunavut, except in the national park, in a manner that will provide the optimum benefit from those waters for the Nunavummiut in particular and Canadians in general. The Nunavut Water Board has responsibilities and powers of the regulations, use, and management of fresh water or inland waters within Nunavut. The board's primary function is to license uses of water and deposits of waste. The Nunavut Waters and Nunavut Surface Rights Tribunal Act states in Section 11(1), subject to subsection 2, no person shall use or permit the use of waters in Nunavut except in accordance with the conditions of a license. Section 11.2 lists those exceptions as the use unlicensed by regulations, domestic use, use in cases of emergency, and uses in a national park. So why is the Water Board participating in this process? And the answer to that is that the Nunavut Agreement directs the board to contribute to the development of a land use plan. Article 13, Section 13.4.1 of the Nunavut Agreement states, the NWB, or the Nunavut Water Board, shall contribute fully to the development of land use plans as they relate to water in the Nunavut settlement area by providing its recommendations to the Nunavut Planning Commission. In support of our obligations under the Nunavut Agreement, the NWB, or the Nunavut Water Board, is working jointly with the steering committee, which includes the Nunavut Planning Commission, Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated, regional Inuit associations, the Government of Nunavut, and Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada, to develop a Nunavut water management strategy. I will call it the strategy. The strategy will create a unified vision for water management in Nunavut, ensure that policies and regulatory activities support sustainable water management and consider cumulative effects, uphold the principles of Inuit Qawimaya, play a role in transboundary watershed agreements, and consider the devolution process. So during these public hearings, the representatives of the Nunavut Water Board have been and will continue listening to the discussions of water management issues and priorities to help inform the further development of the strategy. Now I will touch upon the review of the 2021 draft Nunavut land use plan that the board has conducted. So the first comment that the board had was requesting clarification from the Commission about whether the 10-kilometer buffers around freshwater crossings that limit activities designated as incompatible uses would operate to limit activities for 10 kilometers along a watercourse where there is a crossing. And in discussions with the Commission staff, this concern has been clarified and resolved. The Nunavut Water Board asked how freshwater caribou crossings currently identified in the 2021 draft Nunavut land use plan would be updated by the Commission. The board also identified that if, during water licensing, the board receives information regarding changes to the existing crossings, the board will continue to consider this information in its licensing process. The board identified that the draft plan limits uses of water in territorial parks to a term of 5 years or less. This limit may be inconsistent with the discretion of the Nunavut Water Board, which authorizes the board to permit the use of water for a term of up to 25 years or the duration of the undertaking using the water. the Nunavut Water Board requested clarification from the Commission as to how the 5-year limit on water use would be applied. The Board noted that there may be some confusion about terminology in the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan and that used by the Nunavut Water Board, and recommended that the description and the definition of the term community water supply watershed be added to the 2021 draft Nunavut Land Use Plan to clearly define these areas and to clarify that the term community water supply watershed is not intended to overlap or replace water management areas as identified in the Nunavut water regulations. In regards to future revisions of the land use plan, the Board noted the Commission's commitment to consider, during its review of the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan, the emergence of relevant policy initiatives from planning partners. The Board identified that the Steering Committee's work to develop the Nunavut Water Management Strategy is highly relevant to water management aspects of the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan. The strategy will reflect watershed, regional, and territorial issues and priorities around fresh water. The Nunavut Water Board thanks the Commission for the opportunity to attend these public hearings and would also like to thank all those who have been willing to share their knowledge, comments, and views about water management issues and priorities throughout this process. We would also like to thank the Hamlet of Cambridge Bay for welcoming us into the community. If anyone would like to further discuss the Board's review of this draft plan, please contact the staff. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank
you.
Any questions from the staff? Jonathan?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is Jonathan Savoy from the Nunavut Planning Commission. Thank you very much to the Nunavut Water Board for the presentation today. You mentioned the development of the Nunavut Water Management Strategy that the Commission is involved in. For the benefit of participants here, would you be able to provide any details on the current estimated timeline for the development of the water management strategy and how that may or may not work with the Commission's proposed timeline of a 7-year periodic review of the approved Nunavut Land Use Plan? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to pass the mic to Jesse O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jonathan, Jesse O'Brien, consultant to the Nunavut Water Board. We're in, as you know, the very early stages of the development of a Nunavut water management strategy. We are looking right now at this juncture to do the necessary background research on water management in the territory as it stands today, conferring with the partner members of the steering committee. The next step in the process will be to begin a process of engagement and consultation with communities, further with the RIAs, or regional Inuit authorities, and with the other members of the steering committee. So the consultation process we anticipate to begin near the end of this year and to extend into 2023. From that process, we will take the outcomes and begin to draft a draft Nunavut water management strategy. This timeline will align with the NPC's proposed process for the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan, and will, by design, allow for the integration of comments and reflection on the water management strategy to be considered within that 7-year review window for the NPC. Thank you.
Jonathan?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Jonathan Savoy from the Nunavut Planning Commission. Thank you very much for the response to that question. One additional issue we'd like to touch on. The Commission has heard concerns from communities in particular about impacts on the community drinking water supplies, and for some community drinking water supplies that extend beyond municipal boundaries but are not disproportionately large, those drinking water supplies are designated as a limited use area with year-round prohibitions on some industrial activities. Does the Nunavut Water Board have any comments on the appropriateness of including year-round prohibitions on certain industrial activities within some community drinking water supplies? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jonathan, for this question. The board would like to defer to the Commission in regards to the designation of the community drinking water supply. The board certainly, on the licensing level, the board certainly considers the impact of any sort of activity on any water source, and especially those that are drinking water sources for communities, in case of a single undertaking. And I could also follow up with you on that in writing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just a reminder to state your name and your organization for the record. Thank you. Jonathan, tema. Apakot sa kauni tamangan.
Questions from the community delegates to the panel.
Mag-go. Kan na isa ka ata.
Thank you, Chair. Wildlife Board. Chair. I just need some clarification to the presentation you made. I imagine you deal with hamlets throughout the territory. The people have many concerns at times to ongoing projects in the Nunavut area. I'd like to know what your concerns are with Nunavut water, fresh water drinking supplies.
Go ahead.
Actually, I made a mistake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for this question. The Water Board, and I've touched briefly on this in regards to when I talked about how the board deals with water sources on a project-by-project basis. So, how the Water Board's process works is that we receive an application from a proponent, be it a company or some other entity that would like to start a project in the area. And we consider the possible impacts of this given project on the water sources in the project area. We are very much involved in the public review process, and the board always takes into account the feedback that it gets from the communities or other interested parties when it comes to the board's decision-making for a license. What sort of conditions would be included in the license? What sort of concerns communities have about the project? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Namik, this gentleman also had a question. Atigo, aparigi ako yun.
Thank you, Chair. To the Water Board panel presentation, it's well said. I'm from Kugaruk HTO. I want to hear from the panel and our people in our rivers. I want to know what is causing why these species are dying at times without any reason or explanation. Is it from the water sources? Are you able to do research on these mammals found in our waters?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could ask a clarification, please, could you please discuss a bit more about the cases of wildlife dying?
Atigo.
Thank you, Chair. I have known the bowhead whales that have died on shores, some fishes near my community, and there are no explanation as to why. Have you done your researches on these species?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Asol Kubisinova, Nunavut Water Board. I understand your question now. I would like to note that the board's mandate only extends to freshwater and inland waters in Nunavut, and the marine areas are excluded. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Questions from the community delegates?
Lucy?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to say it's not a question, it's a general comment. The rivers in our areas are running very low. The water levels are so low now in many areas, and the shoreline is eroding at times in many areas. It's just a general problem in other communities. The water sources are running low, and it has been in evidence for a few years now. It's not only in my community, and I have heard from the other regions as well that their water levels are running so low.
More of a comment? You want to go ahead?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for this comment. This is very valuable. I know we've had a bit of a sidebar discussion yesterday, and this is exactly the feedback that the steering committee for the Nunavut Water Management Strategy is looking for. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, this is Asol Kubesanova, Nunavut Water Board.
Thank you. Salome? She had a question.
Thank you, Chair. Solomon Kachalik, Joe Haven, Hamlet Councillor. I am very pleased, and what you have presented is valuable. Now my question. Our watershed, our drinking water is a small lake. We are from an island. And I have seen in other communities their water supply and their watersheds. They are very well kept, and they appear to have strong policies, so their water supplies are envious. Now our water source is so close to the community, and at the same time it is community's fishing spot. It's quite dirty. The garbage is piling up around the lake. You, as a board responsible for fresh water boards, how would you be able to deal with this so it could be safer drinking water for our community? I need help from anybody who will listen to me, because we have a very limited water supply and the watershed is not there. That is my concern.
Okay, Namik, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hasol Kobesinova, Nunavut Water Board. Thank you, Salami, for this question and outlining the issues with Joe Haven's water source. As the board is located in Joe Haven, we are very much familiar with the situation. A bit of an issue with that is that the board does not enforce the conditions of a water license. That is done by an inspector, a water resources inspector. So in regards to maybe adding another water source, as a Hamlet councillor, I'm sure you are aware that the Hamlet is working with the government of Nunavut's Community Government Services, and that is the entity that provides technical and financial support to hamlets in regards to their water infrastructure. So as the board is always open to consider an application from the hamlet for an amendment of its current water license to add another water source or to switch to another water source altogether. But that is something that needs to be discussed between the hamlet and the government of Nunavut's Community Government Services. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Namik. Any other question? Antigo, David?
Thank you, Chair. David Tutalik, Talugyo Hamlet Councillor. My question to the panel is just for you to hear. In the land in Nunavut, perhaps it only applies to people coming up here to work or to explore. In our community, we have a lake for water source. The water board have mandates to look at projects if it's outside the municipal boundary. Do you have specific policies for water plans for the communities that have deficiency in fresh water? So that came to mind listening to your presentation and questions.
Renamik, tan
It's not really relevant to the progress, the proceedings that are we're conducting. I'll take that as general comment. It's not related to Nunavut Planning Commission mandate. Some of these questions that are posed to the panel, I know we are here to hear, and we have different organizations making presentations to the proceedings. So when we have questions, I would like a specific questions to be directed to the panels at the table. Any other questions?
Beverly?
Good morning, Beverly McSarrick with the Ekarukducha Hunters and Trappers Organization. In the 2016 draft here, on bullet number or on page 8, it mentions about the Hiokita River, and that is close to the Bechamo and Bathurst outpost camps. And you also mentioned the 10-kilometer buffers around the watersheds. Has the Water Board done any studies around these rivers with the buffer being 10 kilometers so that we can confirm and know that the river system is being protected and that they're not being polluted by mining companies with their with any kind of seepage going through the rivers? Has anything like that has been studied from the Water Board?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sol Kubisinova, Nunavut Water Board. Thank you, Beverly, for this question. We have not done any studies per se, but the board does review impacts from a given project on a given area. So if there is an entity, a mining company in your example, that is discharging waste somewhere in the area, they would require a water license to do so. And the impacts, the process of that discharge would have been looked during the board's licensing process, which relies heavily on public review and feedback from the communities and other interveners. So I'm not quite familiar with projects in that area, so this is the extent of what I can say right now, but we can always talk about that a bit later, and I can consult with my colleagues in Johaven, and we could provide you with a more expansive response. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any more questions, Beverly?
Any more questions from the community delegates? Thank you. It appears there's none. Now to the floor from registered participants. Questions to the panel?
Nope.
It appears none. Thank you. There's no questions from the floor. Thank you for your presentation and for answering questions directed to you. I think we'll take a short break at this time, 15 minutes.
Koyaname Ixaviltuk. Kwana very much for the opportunity to present here today. My name is Heather Rasmussen. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor with the Nunavut Impact Review Board. And I'm also a member of the Nunavut Marine Council Working Group. So today I'm going to be speaking on behalf of the Nunavut Marine Council. I'm going to be providing an overview presentation of what the Nunavut Marine Council is and how the council fits into the Nunavut land use planning process. So first, I would like to thank the Nunavut Marine Council Policy Advisor, Colleen Parker, for preparing this presentation, and also the Nunavut Marine Council Working Group members for their input. And unfortunately, Colleen was unable to be here today to present. However, she has been following along with the proceedings thanks to the video streaming. So the Nunavut Marine Council is defined in the Nunavut Agreement under Article 15. And then it's further defined in the Nunavut Waters and Nunavut Surface Rights Tribunal Act and the Nunavut Planning and Project Assessment Act. So the Nunavut Planning Commission, the Nunavut Impact Review Board, the Nunavut Water Board, and the Nunavut Wildlife Management Board may jointly, together as the Nunavut Marine Council, or individually by themselves, advise and make recommendations to government agencies regarding the marine areas in the Nunavut settlement area. This is both territorial and federal government. And government must consider this advice and recommendations when making decisions which affect these marine areas. So rather than create a standalone organization for marine management, like, say, another institution of public government, the Nunavut Agreement provides this mechanism that allows the 4 organizations to use their collective experience and to coordinate to provide that advice on issues affecting the marine areas of the Nunavut settlement area. So I just want to clarify that the Nunavut Marine Council is not responsible for making rules, regulations, or enforcing them. So the function of the Nunavut Marine Council extends each of the 4 organizations' daily responsibility, and it provides an additional role regarding marine management and makes sure there's no duplication. So this just means that we don't do work that the 4 organizations are already responsible for. And I'm going to go into this a little bit further in my presentation. So the area that we're talking about is defined under Section 111 of the Nunavut Agreement. Marine areas means that part of Canada's internal waters or territorial sea, whether open or ice-covered, lying within the Nunavut settlement area, but does not include inland waters. For greater certainty The reference to internal waters or territorial sea includes the seabed and subsoil below those internal waters or territorial sea. So I'm now going to provide a very high-level overview of some of the key organizational milestones of the Nunavut Marine Council. So in 1998, the Nunavut Marine Policy Advisory Council was established. This included working together on a discussion paper, a draft terms of reference, a draft memorandum of understanding, and publishing a Nunavut Marine Issues Action Plan. Then in 1998, the Nunavut Marine Council was formally established. And then in 2008, the Nunavut Marine Council members reaffirmed the Nunavut Marine Council and updated the terms of reference. So further milestones have included developing a memorandum of understanding in 2009, developing a business case, launching a website in 2016, and which we recently redesigned, publishing an essay in a journal, and then, as we're all very excited, we were able to hire a Nunavut Marine Council policy advisor, Colleen Parker, in 2019. And her role is to support the implementation of the Nunavut Marine Council strategic plan, which was developed in 2017. So building on the language in the Nunavut Agreement, the business case, as well as the strategic planning workshop, the Nunavut Marine Council adopted the following vision for the 2018 to 2023 period: to be an active, effective, and respected voice on marine issues for Nunavummiut, the strategic plan outlines 3 key functions as part of this mission in a manner consistent with the principles of Inuit Kalimayutukanyit and Article 15 of the Nunavut Agreement. And these principles are raising awareness, providing advice, and undertaking advocacy. The Nunavut Marine Council is composed of the chairperson and Nunavut Marine Council representative from each of the Nunavut Planning Commission, Nunavut Impact Review Board, Nunavut Water Board, and Nunavut Wildlife Management Board. Each organization is responsible for nominating their Nunavut Marine Council representative. So the chairperson and the Nunavut Marine Council representative from each of the 4 organizations represent the interests of their respective boards or commission during meetings 2 times a year. We also have a staff-level working group that has been established with the executive directors and senior staff representing each member institution of public government, along with the Nunavut Marine Council Policy Advisor. And this working group is responsible for implementing the strategic plan Both the Nunavut Marine Council and the working group operate by working together and through consensus decision-making. Under the Nunavut Marine Council strategic plan, there are two main goals. The first is to establish the Marine Council as a key voice on marine shipping. And the second is to establish the Marine Council as a key voice on marine conservation. So under these two main goals, the Marine Council will achieve its vision by performing the key functions I introduced earlier and are on the screen. The Nunavut Marine Council undertakes work through public engagement, which includes public education and engagement activities. This involves increased awareness of what the Marine Council is and its mandate and activities for the public and government agencies. It also is about increasing the awareness of issues of importance to Nunavummiut within the marine areas of Nunavut. So some of the awareness activities that the Marine Council has undertaken include developing a new website and establishing a social media presence, and also conducting a Nunavut-wide logo contest. The Council, through its policy advisor, participates in regional and federal level marine meetings, including the Nunavut Marine Conservation Target Steering Committee, the Canadian Marine Advisory Council, Arctic Shipping Forum, and Coastal Zone Canada Conference, among others. So advice and advocacy work has focused on providing recommendations to the Government of Canada. Some recommendations have been produced in the form of a response to ban on heavy fuel oil in May 2020. Comments on ocean noise strategy in 2021. Comments on a blue economy strategy in 2021. And comments on the National Marine Conservation Area Policy in 2022. So we are currently planning to host in the future a symposium that will bring together representatives from community and regional organizations, as well as representatives from territorial and federal departments with a direct or indirect mandate related to Arctic marine conservation and shipping. The symposium will provide a platform to discuss shipping and conservation activities, issues, and potential options for coordinating and prioritizing initiatives. It will also guide the work undertaken by the Nunavut Marine Council. So we have already started to work with an external consultant to support this initiative, and they've started by gathering information on existing knowledge and perspectives on marine shipping and marine conservation that have been brought forward through the individual processes of the 4 organizations. And the Marine Council will also be developing plain language summaries. So now to shift the discussion to the Nunavut land use planning process. So as we all have heard, the Nunavut land use plan applies to all projects and project proposals within the Nunavut settlement area and outer land fast ice zone. The Nunavut Marine Council is acting as an observer in this process, and this is to inform the Council's recommendations and advice to government agencies about non-project shipping, which is outside the scope of the land use plan. So the Nunavut Marine Council's potential recommendations and advice are very broad, relating to the marine environment in Nunavut, and are informed by the information shared in the individual organizations' processes, including these public hearings. So in conclusion, the Nunavut Marine Council's role in the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan process is to listen to the information, concerns, and knowledge shared, and to inform its recommendations to government agencies regarding the marine areas. And the Nunavut Marine Council is aware that in the past, participants in the land use planning process have suggested that the Marine Council be involved in the process as an outlet for marine issues. So the hope is that with this presentation, there's a greater understanding of the role of the Nunavut Marine Council in the process. Koyaname, once again, for the opportunity to present on behalf of the Nunavut Marine Council as an organization, again, made up of the Nunavut Planning Commission, the Nunavut Impact Review Board, the Nunavut Water Board, and the Nunavut Wildlife Management Board. And again, with a mandate to provide advice and recommendations on marine areas to government. And I'm very happy to take comments and to answer questions. Koyaname Iksavoltak.
Koyaname,
Thank you. We have no question from the staff.
Jeannie? Jeannie have a question?
The floor, please. Thank you, Chair Jinuk York, Taluka Hamlet. In your presentation at our advisory group to the 4 IPGs. Will you be traveling to the communities to inform what your new mandates are to Marine of Nunavut?
Koyaname Iksavoltak.
Thank you, Chair.
Heather Rasmussen with the Nunavut Impact Review Board. Koyaname, for your question. So right now we are looking at different ways that we can do outreach with the communities. One of the greatest limitations of the Nunavut Marine Council right now is funding. So right now, each of the 4 organizations receive every year $25,000, plus a little bit extra to account for inflation. And we did receive funding from Transport Canada for 2 years to support the Marine Council Policy Advisor position. And right now, the 4 institutions of public government are supporting that position in the Nunavut Marine Council work. So currently, we don't have the funding to go into each individual community. However, with the Nunavut Marine Symposium, the plan is to bring representatives from each each community once we are able to get that off the ground, since we ran into some issues with COVID-19. We are also currently looking at other ways of outreach in the community, such as going on radio stations, through Facebook, and reaching out individually to key organizations like the Hunters and Trappers organizations and the hamlets. Koyanami.
Any further questions? Thank you, Chair Gino York Hamlet of Talok York. And you appear to have many limitations due to what you have mentioned. When you have time, when the funding comes through and you're able to travel, we have many concerns in our territorial waters, areas around Botia Peninsula. We need preservation of these coastal areas. We, of course, are looking forward to working with you and hoping to see you in the coming years. Any further questions from the community delegates?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bobby Greenlee, Jack Hunters and Trappers Organization Chair. It's more of a comment, and it's a little bit off topic here of what we're trying to go towards. But all this, a lot of the stuff that you mentioned, we have already started and put in place. So maybe contacting the local Hunters and Trappers Organization would help you a lot. And a lot of the information we brought forward to the commission, planning commission here, and we are going to submit that in the future. So just some information. A lot of the stuff that you mentioned, we've already started a while back. So like with the heavy fuels, we asked for that to be banned as the region, Kitakmir Regional Wildlife Board. A lot of the members here can probably remember when we submitted the paperwork. So all this stuff is started long time ago, and nobody's ever communicated to the HGOs from the Marine Council. I've never been approached, our office. So, you know, there's so many ways to get a hold of us. It's very easy. So I just wanted to make note of that, and sorry for getting off track. It's just information for the council, Marine Council. Thank you.
Any more questions from the community delegates? It appears none from registered participants. Go ahead, Beverly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Beverly McSarek with Yakalututari HTO. You mentioned, like Bobby mentioned, about the heavy fuel oil ban. We did support the World Wildlife Federation on the heavy fuel ban, and I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more of any consultation you had with the World Wildlife Federation. Even if you send us a written answer, we'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Koyaname Ixavotak. Heather Rasmussen with the Nunavut Impact Review Board. Kwana for your question and Kwana for both of your comments. So just first to kind of address both of what I've heard, I just want to explain just a little bit of what I mentioned earlier in the presentation, is that our Marine Council policy advisor and the consultants that we have hired have gone through the reports from the different processes, such as the land use planning process from the Nunavut Planning Commission. One of the key things we have heard as staff in communities has been that quite often organizations come in and keep asking the same questions, and it doesn't always seem like we're listening. So that's one thing that we tried to do, was to do the background work and see what has already been shared so that we could use that as a starting point to show that we are listening to what has been shared through all of these individual processes, and then to get validation whether these concerns are still valid or not. But we will definitely be reaching out. So the Nunavut Marine Council, through the policy advisor position, has done a lot of outreach to organizations, including the World Wildlife Federation. With regards to the Council's formal submission on the response to ban heavy fuel oil, the Council submitted a letter to the Ministers of Transport Canada, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and the Canadian Coast Guard. So this was in 2020. The letter acknowledged the benefits of the ban on the use and carriage of heavy fuel oils as fuel by ships. They recommended that the 10-year timeline for application of the ban be reconsidered. The Council recognized the potential adverse economic implications of this ban for Arctic communities and local development. And similar to what other organizations were also expressing, requested that measures be developed to offset the adverse economic implications of this ban. The Council also recommended that spill response capacity be reviewed, considering the change in types of fuel used in the Canadian Arctic, and that associated capacity improvements be made. And the Council did receive a response. And Beverly, I can make sure that you receive both of those documents. Koyan may iksavoltak kwana.
Enamik, Emma. Apa ko sa takapaling amang isa sa mga
questions
participant? Is there any questions?
from registered participants?
Just wait.
Just hang on, please.
Yeah, if there's no question from the registered participant,
Please.
Member of the public want to ask a question? Atigo, tabon. Yep, he can go ahead. There's nobody raised a hand from the registered participant. Whenever you're ready, you can ask the question. Koyanamik?
Local resident. I brought this up 27 or 26 years ago with KIA and HTO and Water Board. I did a little bit of study myself about the marine and our shorelines. I've been finding a little bit of garbage inside the char and a little bit inside the seal in their stomachs. And I'm still waiting to find out when is our shorelines are going to be cleaned. I have brought this up 26 years ago. Thank you.
Kuya Namik, that question applied to someone else at the moment. Like I said earlier, I know there's other people from other organizations are here, and you can ask them privately. And at the moment, we're dealing with the Nunavut Land Use Plan, draft Nunavut Land Use Plan. So you can maybe it would be better to follow up with your KIA on that issue. So, mamianak, we can continue to our meeting here. Is there any other question from the public regarding the presentation? I don't see any hands. Kuya Namik,
Thank you.
for your presentation. Thank you. Earlier this morning, we were approached about our agenda. We asked Agni Koigo to see if it's okay if Sabina Gold and Silver Corp could go ahead of them, and they both agreed. So Sabina Gold and Silver Corp can take the seat. Just a reminder, state your name and your organizations and talk to the microphone. Whenever you're ready, you guys can start. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Merle Keefe, Sabina Gold and Silver. I'm the manager of environmental permitting with Sabina Gold and Silver. With me here today, directly to my right, we have Andrew Moore. He's the director of Indigenous and Northern Affairs within Sabina. And to his right, I think most of you know him, but this is John Kaigana. He's Sabina's community liaison officer, and he's based here in Cambridge Bay. Before I get started, I would just like to give a sincere thank you to Mr. Chair and the commissioners for allowing Sabina to move up in the agenda. We certainly don't feel like we are more important or should be prioritized over the remaining presenters, but full honesty, transparency, I received some unfortunate news on the health of my father last night, and I'm trying to get home as quick as I can. So, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Okay, to get started, many thanks to the Hamlet of Cambridge Bay for hosting these hearings, and to the Nunavut Planning Commission for inviting our participation. And before I forget, a big thank you to the translators, the caterers, the communication staff, etc. Thank you to all the Hamlets and the HTO representatives who have traveled from across the Kitikmeot to participate in this process. We've been an active participant in the planning process, and we look forward to continuing that. Sabina's flagship project is the Back River project. We've been in Nunavut for quite some time speaking about the Back River project. The original project proposal was submitted to NERB approximately 10 years ago now, a decade, in 2012. The Back River project is located, there's sort of three main components for the Back River project. The marine laydown area, which is located in southern Bathurst Inlet. It's just that, it's a laydown area. It's where we bring in equipment, supplies, and fuels, and we lay them down there. In the winter, we construct a 160, 170 kilometer winter ice road, and we truck those equipment and supplies and fuels down to our mine site, which is called Goose Lake. There has been, previously some confusion around the location of the Back River project. I would like to clarify that it's not located near the headwaters of Back River, which are south of Johaven on the mainland. It's south of Bathurst Inlet, approximately 300 to 350 kilometers south of where we're at now. Sabina's board of directors recently made the announcement for full project construction. It's been some time coming, and we're very excited about that. 2023, Sabina will commence full construction of our project site. It's a milestone event for us, but we also feel for the Kitikmeot region, as employment and training and programming will begin to ramp up and rolled out by Sabina and its partners, specifically the Kitikmeot Inuit Association. Sabina is requesting that our assets, Sabina's assets, the Back River project, including the George property and Bipar, be listed under Appendix A. They are currently not listed under Appendix A. Sabina appreciated the screening criteria that was presented by Mr. Savoy earlier in the week, which outlined the requirements to be listed within Appendix A. Upon review, Sabina believes, we check the boxes for that screening criteria in their entirety, with the exception that our project currently does not overlap a limited use area. However, as we've heard multiple times throughout these hearings, and detailed within the Commission's responses to pre-submitted questions, the Nunavut land use plan, as currently proposed, may be amended, and it's subject to legislated periodic reviews in perpetuity going forward. For this reason, we feel it is justified to reiterate our request for our assets to be listed within Appendix A. We see no harm to the draft Nunavut land use plan to listing our projects within Appendix A. The Back River project is active. We have mineral rights with the Government of Canada and Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated. And it's been previously reviewed and approved through the comprehensive Nunavut regulatory system. All important criteria the Nunavut Planning Commission have outlined as important criteria to be listed under Appendix A. That said, we're encouraged with the conversation that has gone on throughout the week, and the references that have been made to reviewing Appendix A upon record close, and we believe that our request should be reviewed, as part of that review process. During the very comprehensive Nunavut Impact Review Board and Nunavut Water Board review processes, multiple design changes to our project were completed due to Inuit or environmental concerns. The Kitikmeot Inuit Association, in particular, were instrumental in driving these project changes, which resulted in a more environmentally responsible project ultimately in the end. Some specific examples of that, for reference, include relocating our tailings storage facility to a more preferred location. Again, that was driven by the Kitikmeot Inuit Association. We also realigned a section of our winter ice road, a northern section of our winter ice road around Tehikafalik Lake or Bathurst Lake. They wanted to avoid a section of traditional importance in vegetation abundance, and that's something that we did. Another example is updating our wildlife management plan. We've heard lots about caribou protection measures and how important they are. And the Kitikmeot Inuit Association were instrumental in providing feedback during the comprehensive review process, which we updated to generate one of the most developed sets of protection measures in the north. In discussion with Nunavut Planning Commission staff, it was suggested that potentially some additional context regarding the existing processes that are in place for the approval of mineral projects on IOL, Inuit-owned land, and the joint development of these protection measures, these caribou protection measures, with the Kitikmeot Inuit Association and other regulators may be beneficial. So I will briefly try to talk about some of that process, and I'm happy to answer additional questions. There's a very rigorous and detailed assessment process in place currently, for all screenings and reviews, especially regarding caribou. During Sabina's Back River Project environmental assessment process, and indeed during these hearings, we have heard from Inuit experts and scientific experts that caribou protection should not be based on a map, and this is because caribou move. That's based on traditional knowledge. Everyone around the table here understands that better than I do, and that feedback was incorporated into the wildlife management plan that we developed with the Inuit through the Nunavut Impact Review process. That's the development of the management plan, but it doesn't stop there. Once these management plans are developed and projects like ours are approved to proceed, we're responsible for adhering to these plans. And to make sure that we're doing this, to confirm that we are adhering to these plans, we have frequent inspections by the Kitikmeot Inuit Association, from the Nunavut Impact Review Board, the Nunavut Water Board, and federal regulatory bodies. In addition to that, we submit detailed annual reports that explain how we are in compliance with the terms and conditions set out in our permits, in our approvals, and these are reviewed in great detail annually. For example, our last year, 2021 annual report, we received approximately 70 questions from just the Kitikmeot Inuit Association. We have requirements under our Inuit Impact Benefit Agreement to establish an Inuit Environmental Advisory Committee. So what is that? For example, representatives from communities are pulled together to form a committee, and they're brought to our project site annually to review our operation and maintenance procedures. A change or a recommendation, for example, that could come out of that committee would be where to place caribou crossings within our existing road network on our project site. Like that would be an example. I think I'll probably stop there with the summary. If there are any additional questions from community members or the staff on the nuts and bolts of that management plan, or how we implement our caribou protection measures when caribou are approaching or are present, I'd be happy to explain that as well. we've heard much about the importance of economic development and the need for strong environmental protection measures in this land use planning process, and we share that vision. We have a project certificate from the Nunavut Impact Review Board that governs our activities. As I've explained, we have frequent inspections from the Kitikmeot Inuit Association, the Nunavut Impact Review Board, and federal regulatory bodies. We will work with the Kitikmeot Inuit Association to continue to establish the Inuit Environmental Advisory Committee, continue to actively engage the Kitikmeot communities in our project planning. As I mentioned, we've been around, Sabina has been around since late 2011, 2012, and we've completed over 300 community engagement sessions since then. And we continue to encourage and welcome any feedback that there may be there for to help meet the needs and the aspirations of the Kitikmeot Inuit. While our project is still in the very early days of its development, we're seeing success. I will just quickly, some numbers for you. Between June and September of 2022, this year, we saw a 150% increase in Inuit employment on our project. We went from 24 Inuit on our project to 60 in September. We're very proud of that. In the first quarter of this year, we had a retention rate of Inuit employment of 92%. So 92 Inuit that we hired remained with the project, and that's a number that we're proud of, and it's above average. We've also provided over $45 million in contracting dollars finances to northern businesses. As stated earlier, our project is still in its very early days, and why those numbers and the achievements should be celebrated. We know we have a lot of work ahead of us to continue to deliver the benefits to the people of the Inuit of the Kitikmeot. And thank you, Kwana, again, to the Commission, as well as those in attendance, for sharing your priorities for land use planning in Nunavut, and we're excited to continually actively engage in this process. So I'll stop there. Thank you, Kwana.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is Jonathan Savoy with the Nunavut Planning Commission. Thank you very much to Sabina and to Merle in particular for presenting here today under some difficult circumstances. During your presentation, you mentioned the current use of a winter road to access and supply the site from the laydown area, and you also made reference to the existing authorizations for the Bathurst Inlet Porton Road. Just for the benefit of commissioners and other participants, could you provide an update on, or comments on the experience with the winter road and intentions for future use of an all-weather road associated with the project? Thank you.
Namik, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Merle Keefe, Sabina Gold and Silver. Thank you, Jonathan, for your question. It's sort of two parts. One would be the winter ice road. So Sabina has sort of constructed our inaugural winter ice road only several years ago now. This upcoming year will be the first full construction of Sabina's winter ice road. Certainly, Sabina has, used those first couple of years to understand the challenges that come with a winter ice road of that length and of the amount of equipment that we are going to bring it down. We have been successful to date in construction and utilizing that winter ice road. We've also successfully better understood the construction and the operation processes that come with constructing and operating the winter ice road. In some cases, we've brought forward those criteria to the Nunavut Impact Review Board as part of that review process and sort of enhanced our ability. For example, and we heard this a lot throughout the environmental assessment process, community concerns related to the winter ice road. They wanted to see camps situated along it, a minimum of 3. So if we had emergencies or if we had weather, that we had a place to go to on that winter ice road. That was a concern that we heard from community members. So it's something that we've officially brought to the NERB and were approved to do so. That was also partly to do with if there were on-land utilizers, if Inuit were on the land, they are absolutely more than welcome to stop into those Sabina winter ice road camps and have shelter or simply warm up and have a tea. The second part, I should say that the second part of that is related to potential all-weather road. We currently, Sabina does not plan on constructing an all-weather road. We are upgrading sections of that winter ice road to help us with future construction, areas where we don't have a lot of access to fresh water, or they're very steep, or significant boulder fields that we need to get over. In those sections, we have placed a limited amount of aggregate as a base. We still build the winter ice road on top of that aggregate base. The requirements of those aggregate sections are clearly outlined in our framework agreement, which is established with the Kitikmeot Inuit Association. That was done very early on during that comprehensive Nunavut regulatory system review. That said, changes in technology, engineering, design, certainly we want to make sure that Inuit can consider or continue to get the full benefits of our project. So if there were any design changes or in future, we would bring that forward through the formal process. In terms of BIPAR, which was the second part of your question, Jonathan, could I just get a little more clarity? Oh, sorry, I turned that off. Could you just give me a little bit more clarity on what you were looking for BIPAR?
Thanks very much, Merle, for the response. This is Jonathan Savoy again from the Nunavut Planning Commission. In regards to BIPAR, just you had mentioned including that as an existing right within Appendix A, and I was just curious for an update on the intentions for the future of BIPAR. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Merle Keefe with Sabina Gold and Silver. So yeah, maybe just take a step back, a little bit of a background on the Bathurst Inlet Port and Road. Sabina does own Bathurst Inlet Port and Road. We purchased the rights from Nuna Logistics and their partnership in 2011. We did not purchase it from Glencore, which I think is a common misconception, or previously Xstrata. Sabina and Glencore established a working relationship over the first few years to jointly support the advancement of Bathurst Inlet Port and Road. However, since about 2015, we have not advanced it. Since about 2015, Sabina has not advanced Bathurst Inlet Port and Road as it requires the development of a major project like Glencore's Hackett River project. So we continue to hold Bathurst Inlet Port and Road, and we may choose to advance it at a later date, but that's where it's at now, Jonathan.
Emma and Namik, any other question from the participant? Yep. We'll go to Beverly first and then.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Beverly McSaggach with the Yakalutujak HTO, Hunters and Choppers. It's nice to hear that the Inuit hire is above average. That is very good news for us to hear. With the increase of Inuit hire, how many of those Inuit are being trained, and in what areas of the mines operations?
I'm sorry. Can we talk about the draft no land use plan? Yeah, you can talk to them directly after. So on to Harry.
Good morning, Harry Maxarak from Cambridge Bay. I noticed on one of the first or second slides, I think it's that one there, that you were looking at being exempt from a prohibition on mineral exploration and production in a limited area. You are working in a very sensitive area, and I'd just like to get a little more clarification on that particular statement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Kwana Merle Keefe with Sabina Gold and Silver, and thank you, Harry, for that question. So just to clarify, any of the projects listed within Appendix A are prohibited or that are located within limited use areas are exempt from mineral exploration and production. Sabina is currently not listed within Appendix A, and this was the request to be listed. Currently, Sabina does not overlap with any of those limited use areas. So where those limited use areas, there is a prohibition on mineral exploration and production, which is the basis of our request, but we're currently not located in those areas. We're located in mixed use areas. That said, Harry, absolutely, we are in an area of ecological importance. We totally understand and respect that. That's why we went through a very comprehensive review process within Nunavut to develop, a strict set of management plans that we have to adhere to. And I've spoken about the wildlife management plan as an example, but it's only one of over 30. We have air quality management plans. We have vegetation management plans. We have archaeology management plans, freshwater fish, etc. All of those management plans were developed with the Nunavut Impact Review Board, with the Kitikmeot Inuit Association, with feedback from community members, from HTOs, Hunters and Trappers organizations, with working groups that Sabina established. So working groups would consist of youth from communities or elders from communities. So Sabina certainly respects the environment. We continue to operate that way.
Namik, Tema? Yeah. Any other question, gentlemen? Donatian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is mainly a comment, and part of it's going to be a question. Paul Ikwalak from KRWB. In the early years of the mine happening in the Back River area. I was with the Community Beneficiary Committee, and the one towards Joe Haven. I represented KIA at the time, and I observed. I like what I see in the Back River surrounding Joe Haven, close to Joe Haven. I seen how the prospectors were working, and I appreciate the way they were handling everything in that area. Thank you very much. Any oil, gas spill is taken care of right away. And also in that area where we went to other prospecting areas towards the ocean, I observed there's no Inukuks anywhere close by it. There's hardly any caribou trails. And I also reported to some of our elders in Joe Haven, and they said they were happy about it. But my term was up on, I couldn't report to KIA. So now I'm chairman for Kitchak Wildlife Management Board. For the time being, I have no complaints. Thank you very much. Kaya
Yeah, any other question about what you said?
Kailangan hiwatak, Jimmy thank you for your presentation. Yeah, I'm very impressed with the employment you guys have with the Inuit. For Turtle Rock, we can't say we don't want mine anywhere. It's and we cannot try and stop the mines that are existing. We just don't want mining in Alberto. Therefore, I just want to comment on that for the record.
Any questions regarding their presentation? Tamangat? I don't see any hands. Any question from the registered participant regarding their presentation? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Luigi Toretti, Katermiut Inuit Association, Consultant 2. Merle, thank you for bringing up the work that the Katermiut Inuit Association did with your project, with the Sabina project. I would like to bring the attention to the land use plan and this particular project, and the view that the Katermiut Inuit Association has for the protection of caribou wherever they may be. The project is in a mixed-use area. That did not stop the Katermiut Inuit Association for requesting and having incorporated some very specific and valuable components relating to caribou for that specific project. Time out.
I don't think that was the question, so it was more of a comment. And Namik, are there any questions from the registered participant? I don't see any more hands. Kuya Namik,
Thank you.
thank you for your presentation and answering. Recognizing the time, maybe we can come back and start again at 1:15. Anusha, Kuya Namik.